Good morning, everyone. This is the January meeting of the TV Toastmasters. I am opening the meeting in lieu of our president being here. He is sick with a cold. Rick, we hope you're feeling better. I would like to welcome everyone. Our guests, we have some guests that you'll be seeing later on. Ray Boston, Kim Fetzer, and Nikki Bishop. And our viewing audience, I'd like to welcome them. Today, our Toastmaster is Joe Schwerling. He is known as Mr. Toastmaster because he has 7 positions right now in Toastmasters. He not only is quite active in Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, but he also is an area governor for the area in Columbus. So let us welcome our Toastmaster for today, Joe Schwerling. Slowly so she can get you up here.
Thank you, Carol. And again, welcome to everyone on this chilly winter. We're halfway through winter, I think, psychologically anyway. Our first main section is our word power, where we like to introduce and start implementing the use of new or unusual words. And for that, I'd like to call up Steve Ehrenholz to present our word power session this morning. Please welcome Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our honored guests, both here and at home. Well, we're in the peak of the cold season, flu season. The word I have for today is one that I think will be a challenge to see how you incorporate it. The word of the day is sternutation. It's a noun, and it's the act, fact, or noise of sneezing. An example would be during the cold and flu season, a chorus of sternutation could be heard around the office as employees gave in to fits of sneezing. Did you know that sternutation comes from Latin, a descendant of the verb stenure, meaning to sneeze? One of the earliest known English uses occurred in a 16th century edition of a medical book on the subject of midwifery, in a passage about infants suffering from frequent sternutation and sneezage. The term has long been used in serious medical contexts, but it has also been used for humorous effect. In 1850, for example, author Grace Greenwood observed that U.S. senators of divergent politics came together to share snuff. A Whig may be seen passing his snuff box to a Democrat who passes it to a Southern ultraist who passes it to a Northern incendiary. And all three forget their sectional differences in a delightful concert of sternutation. No business is too grave, no speaker too elegant to be sneezed at. Mr. Toastmaster?
Thank you, Steve. I'm sure that's an unusual word that most of us have never heard before, but we'll hear a lot this today. As it happens, most of my life I've been known for my sternutations, as I've had occasional sneezing fits, particularly in church. It seemed like the dust stirred up would just cause me to sneeze half a dozen times in a row or more, and apparently I had a distinctive sneeze, so I've been told by relatives and friends that my sternutations were very recognizable. And at a recent Toastmasters contest, I was asked to sit toward the rear when I was having a couple of similar bouts. At this point, I'd like to call on Nellie Bowen as our joke master today.
Thank you,
Nellie.
Mr. Toastmaster. Well, since this will be shown in February, my jokes are about Valentine's Day. A guy walks into a post office one day and sees a middle-aged, balding man standing at the counter methodically placing love stamps on bright pink envelopes with hearts all over them. After he gets those done, he starts spraying perfume all over him. Well, the man can't understand what he's doing, so he goes up to the balding man and says, "What are you doing?" The man says, I'm sending out 1,000 valentines, signed, guessed who? He says, why are you doing that? I'm a divorce lawyer. That man knows marketing. My second one, little David comes home from first grade and tells his father that they learned about the history of Valentine's Day at school. Since Valentine's Day is for a Christian saint, and we're Jewish, he asks his dad, will God get mad at me for giving someone a Valentine? David's father thinks a bit and then says, no, I don't think God would get mad. Who do you want to give a Valentine to? Osama bin Laden, David says. Osama bin Laden? Why do you want to give a Valentine to him? Well, David says, I thought if a little American Jewish boy cared enough to give Osama a Valentine, he might start to think that maybe we're not all bad, and maybe start loving people just a little bit. And if other kids saw what I did, and they start sending him Valentines, maybe he'd start loving everyone a lot. And then he'd start going all over the place, telling everyone how much he loved them, and he wouldn't hate people anymore. His father's heart swells, and he looks at his boy with newfound pride. David, that's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard. I know, David says. And once that gets him out in the open, the Marines can shoot him.
Thank you, Nellie. Our next portion of today's meeting is Tabletopics, where members and guests have the opportunity to participate and answer impromptu questions or elaborate on impromptu situations that are posed by the Tabletopics master. Our Tabletopics master today is Carol Kormelink, ATM Silver, and Division Governor.
Thank you, Joe. Our table topics today are nothing to sneeze at. That's sternutation. Is that a new word for me? Okay, with today being the very coldest day of the year for the last 2 years, 2 degrees, our table topics will be timely. For instance, if I were to ask you, how cold is it, you might reply, it is colder than a mother-in-law's kiss. And then you might explain where we got that phrase. So, to start off with, for our first question, you have to listen to the question and then you think quickly before you come up to answer. So, many times a fresh blanket of snow meant scooping up a cup of snow to eat, something you probably wouldn't do today with acid rain. What is something that you used to do years ago that you wouldn't think of doing today besides sitting on ladies' laps, Joe Buell? You gotta come up here. Yeah, keep clapping until he gets up here.
Madam Tabletopic Master, distinguished members of this illustrious club. I forgot the question.
What is something you used to do years ago that you wouldn't think of doing today besides sitting on ladies' laps?
Well, I still prefer sitting on a lady's lap. But I do not like snow very much. I just put up with it and sacrifice myself a few days during the winter. So I never ate any snow, and I will not eat any snow, considering the pollution that is in the air these days. And besides, my cardiologist will prevent me from doing so. I can't be out in the cold too long and so on, since I had the heart attack. I wish I had a joke for that, but I do not have a joke. What else can I do to stand and put up with snow? Nothing. Just Lord created it, and just take it as it comes, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Joe. So they don't mind if you sit on the ladies' laps today? Okay, a big snow meant sled riding for a lot of people. What does a big snow mean to you today, Joe Schwerling?
Madam Tabletopics Master. Well, the first thing that came to mind was that if I was having a bout of sternation and I happened to have a lot of dandruff, it might be like falling snow. Also, as my hair is graying more, if I was beginning to lose it, again, could be like falling snow. Although I've been advised by my twin sister that my hair is much thicker than hers and I don't seem to lose near as much. As thinking back to my school days, we were always looking forward to having a day off to go sled riding and such. Seems like they get more days off lately than we did in the past. But then these days they have nowhere to go sled riding unless they go to a local park or something, because all the local hillsides that used to be undeveloped are pretty well covered now. But now that I'm in my semi-retirement age, I would look forward to being able to do some sled riding, and a few years ago I did some skiing with my now 14-year-old niece, so I might do some of that again, but trying not to break anything. Madam Tabletopics Master.
Thank you, Joe. I thought you might say that it also meant that you had to shovel the sidewalks in front of the apartment buildings that you have. Thought you might mention that. And sometimes when it's snowing and it's slick out, how slick was it, Nellie? Nellie Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. How slick was it? It was so slick. It was like trying to ice skate without skates. Now that's slick. It's like for me trying to roller skate. I only tried it once or twice. I had one on each arm trying to hold me up. Good sturdy guys, but I almost got both of them down. Now that's pretty slick. And I'm not too good on anything slippery. I had 2 bad falls one winter, and I've been afraid ever since. But yes, it's slippery. It can be so slippery you think you're going to break your neck. That's slippery. You know what my mother always told me? She said, "You're as graceful as a cow on ice." I think she meant that as a compliment. Are cows graceful on ice? I don't think so. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Nellie. One of the things when we were young and we had to bundle up when we went outside, what was your favorite snow outfit, Sheila?
Well, Madam Toastmaster, Tabletopics Master, my favorite snow outfit was not my mother's favorite snow outfit, because when I was a child, we didn't have those waterproof clothes. They were wool. And I loved rolling in the snow, making snow angels, rolling around with the dogs in the neighborhood, just having a great time. And I would come in with my clothes totally solid with ice, and they would be soaked through. And it was only when I was in pain from that wet wool would I come in. And they would sit, my mother and my father actually, it took them a lot of trouble to get the clothes up because they were soaked. And they would sit them up on the floor register, and then they would stand up like there were live people inside of them. And he would stand them up and shrink the water out. The water would be pulled out, and then the interesting part was getting back into that outfit the moment it dried, to go back out and do it all over again. So snow outfits, I think that was my favorite. These days, however, I would prefer not to wear anything quite that heavy.
Thank you, Sheila. When you said about the registers, that reminded me that one time those registers got really hot, and I sat with my bare bottom, so I had waffle weave designed for a while. Now, this is a picture of a polar bear in a snowstorm. And how do you know if you're looking at the front or the back of the polar bear? Ray Boston.
Toastmaster. Thank you. Well, it's very easy. The back of a polar bear looks like this, and the front of a polar bear looks like this, and it should be fairly easy to tell the difference. But whenever I see snoller bears, that's pretty good. That's a pun, you all. You know, you don't have to laugh at that, but I appreciate it. Don't stop. I'm going to bring you with me to my next presentation. But if I ever see a polar bear, it just makes me do what I used to love to do as a kid, because I do eat snow. For me, it is a ritual, because when I was a kid, one of our favorite things was to make snow ice cream. And if you don't know the recipe, it's like a cup of snow, some condensed milk, sometimes even use the super condensed. We use the Eagle brand, or either you can use evaporated milk. I think it was 2.5 teaspoons of sugar, and you were in snow heaven. I did it then. And here is the gourmet snow queen. Just a quarter, maybe even 2 drops of vanilla. You had the perfect thing, and you probably used a vanilla bean, right? super gourmet. So I'm going to have to try that on our next snow. So I can't wait till next week, when is our next prediction of snow. So see me next week. If anybody wants to come to my house and share some snow ice cream like we did at our youth, I'd love to have you. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Ray. And you're brave enough to eat snow today with the S.
Thank you very much. And now for our next speaker, Stanley Glitchner.
Speaking in public doesn't have to be a death sentence. At Toastmasters, we can help you overcome your fears.
We will now be going into the prepared speech section of our meeting. Today we're having twin presentations from the Communicating on Television Advanced Manual. There are 5 project speeches in the television manual, and one of those is on being the host in a interview situation, and the other is on being a guest. So we will start with an interview where Sheila Mudd Baker will be interviewing Jerome Manigan on the subject of volunteerism. The specific objectives for the host are to conduct a successful television interview, to understand the dynamics of a successful interview or talk show, and to prepare questions to ask during the interview program to prevent a positive, confident image on the television camera. And of course, we have the perfect scenario here since we're broadcasting on AUCT. Okay, the objectives are the same for both, except again with in this case Sheila being the host and Jerome being the guest. So we will now move to the.
Hello, I'm Sheila Mudd Baker, and I am very excited to interview for TV Toastmasters, Jerome Manigan, who is not only a member of TV Toastmasters, but also of Cincinnati Toastmasters, who is a certified leader, competent leader, a certified Toastmaster, an advanced Toastmaster, you name it, he has done something interesting in Toastmasters. What makes this even more exciting is all the kinds of volunteer work that Jerome Manigan has done. And so I want to ask Jerome what it is about volunteering that makes it so exciting.
First, Sheila, let me say that I'm very grateful to be here, to have this opportunity to talk with you and to share information with our viewers about volunteerism. I have been an active volunteer for, I suppose, the better part of 2 decades, maybe approaching 3 decades. I feel that it is very important for each and every member of our community to assess his, her skills, abilities, talents, and to find organizations that can benefit from their contributions. I think that volunteerism allows us to meet other people whom we would otherwise not have an opportunity to meet. It certainly allows us to share knowledge, skills, information with others, and it allows us to engage in situations where we can work harmoniously together to accomplish a stated goal. I think it's a very important activity.
One of the things that I noticed is that you were involved in radio reading services, and because I'm involved in radio reading services too, I noticed your name on several awards for your broadcasting efforts. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I have been the recipient of several Ohio Education Broadcasters Awards. Those awards are called the OBIE Awards. I received the Program of the Year Awards twice in a row. One year I did a series of programs about candidates for Cincinnati City Council. I think that year there were 26 people, and I put together half-an-hour programs in which I interviewed all of those candidates. And of course, radio reading services caters to our programs for people with reading, not reading, but visual problems. And that year, the issue was the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I wanted to get the thoughts of those candidates about the city of Cincinnati and the implementation of that law. So I won the award for Program of the Year for that program, and the following year I won the award for a series of programs that I produced with Peter Robinson, who at that time was the public relations person for the Cincinnati Playhouse. We did a series of programs. That program was titled Playhouse Perspectives, and we took a look at the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park from the front to the back. We took a look at the costume department. We took a look at the marketing department, had an opportunity to interview producers, had an opportunity to interview set designers, directors. It was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I understand that I have a program up for an award this year. Yeah, so radio reading services has been an opportunity that I have thoroughly enjoyed. And I've been with them for about 23 years. I think I am the longest continuing volunteer for radio reading services.
For those of you who may not be familiar with radio reading services, it is a service with special radios to provide opportunities to hear the news, to read the paper, so to speak, to hear novels, to hear perspectives that are geared for people who have visual disabilities. It could be full blindness, it could be legal blindness. It is now part of the Cincinnati Association for the Blind. But clearly, Jerome, you read for them all the time, so the question is, what is it? It's not really the awards you might win, but what is it that makes you really want to get there as often as you do, and you go there often?
Because it's an opportunity for me to give of myself. It's an excellent way for me to give of myself. And I'd like to backtrack for just a second, if I may. Many people who are listening or watching this program have heard radio reading services because in addition to the special receivers, it is also broadcast on cable, all right? So those people that you hear reading in the background, who you might think are national reading heads in this case, are really people from your community who are reading publications, and you have an opportunity to hear them as part of the cable broadcast. And radio reading services is not limited to Cincinnati. It is a syndicated service, and it is heard in many, many, many places. Now, I do it because it's an opportunity for me to give of myself, and that is very important to me.
Well, it's not just radio reading services that you're involved in. I know that you very much like art, and you're interested especially in the more contemporary art. Can you tell us about your job as a docent at the Contemporary Art Center?
My work with the Contemporary Art Center is very interesting. If you have seen exhibits mounted by the Contemporary Art Center, you know that it is quite different from exhibits that are mounted at the Art Museum or other more contemporary or traditional museums. I got involved with the Contemporary Art Center because of my interest in art and because of my desire to stretch beyond the contemporary, the usual, the expected. I like being different, and I like testing the limits of differences. So when the opportunity to volunteer for the Contemporary Art Center came about, I was very, very happy to do that.
Well, speaking of contemporary art and being different, that's the most different beard decoration I've seen in my lifetime. Quite impressive.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy it too. If we were in Berkeley, probably this would blend in with, and people would say, why have you not been more imaginative? Why are you not more creative? I mean, what is it to have a few beads strung to your goatee? But that's Cincinnati for us, and what can I say, you know? But wait until summer, and it's multicolored. I expect to have green and red and yellow, and it's just going to be me expressing myself through my appearance.
It sounds like that all of us should be looking for Art Manigan as a rainbow this summer. Art, I think all of us are interested in volunteering. Are there other opportunities that you can see for people that they might get involved here in Cincinnati?
I would think that the best way to become involved is to do a self-assessment. What is it that I am interested in? What is it that I am willing to give, in some cases, inordinate amount of time to? How can I make a positive, meaningful impact on the work of that organization? Then I think you get on the telephone or in person. You go to places and you say, what are the volunteer opportunities available to people? I would like to volunteer my time, my services, my money. And you can volunteer your money to a lot of these organizations because a lot of the nonprofit organizations certainly can utilize that kind of support. So I think it's really about a self-assessment, then some telephone calls or personal visits to find out exactly in what ways you can be involved.
Thank you, Art. I think, Art, your name isn't Art, you are Art.
You know, when you said Art, I said she must be prophetic or clairvoyant. My father's name, and he's deceased, is in fact Arthur. Ah. And he decided to name my two brothers after himself. And when I came along, he said, well, I'll name him after my father. So when you said art, it was perfectly all right, because if my father had not had such a generous spirit, I would have no doubt been an art myself.
For all of you who have not heard radio reading services or have never had an opportunity, both Jerome and I invite you to call the radio reading services part of Cincinnati Association for the Blind to get a chance to come up to the studios. Just as you can come to cable studios, as we have, you can also go to radio studios and learn more about radio, if that's what interests you, or in Art's case, art. If in Jerome's case, learning more about art. What an exciting thing to learn more about what you already love. So, Jerome, do you have any parting words for our viewing audience?
You've been a very gracious hostess, and I've enjoyed being here today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to our viewers about volunteerism.
And thank you. You are always fascinating.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
I'd like to begin tonight with a little joke. This guy, he's a farmer. He says, "Hey, hello, sorry." But seriously, folks.
Speaking in public is no joke.
Farmer says, doctor says, chicken says.
For help, call Toastmasters, the public speaking support group.
The chicken.
Thank you very much, Sheila and Jerome. Hope the audience and everyone enjoyed the information they had. From my own experience, I can tell you that my own father had used the radio reading service himself for several years before he died, and it was quite beneficial. Now, for our next presentation, Sheila and Jerome will actually be reversing roles, where Jerome will be interviewing Sheila on a topic of interest and that she wishes to communicate to us all, and that's the Cincinnati Recreation Commission. So at this point, we will move over again to the interview set to...
Welcome to today's edition of TV Talk Masters. I'm Jerome Manigan. I have a very informative guest with me today, Sheila Mudd Baker. Sheila is the personnel director of the Cincinnati Recreation Commission, and that's where we're going to focus the majority of our comments today. But before we get there, Sheila, I would like to read to our audience information about yourself, biographical information about you. Sheila Mudd Baker has served as the Secretary, Vice President of Marketing, and President of the Northern Hills Toastmasters. She has also served as an area governor. She is a CTM, CL, and an ATM bronze. Sheila, can you give us some background information about the Cincinnati Recreation Commission?
I would be delighted. The Cincinnati Recreation Commission is 75 years old, and it has provided public recreation for people in the whole greater Cincinnati area for that 75-year period. Initially, it started with a few swimming pools and baseball games in the streets and an occasional hopscotch game. It went further with basketball, Lunkin Playfield, and a variety of pools until the 1970s, when we built so many pools that we had more pools per capita than any other city in the country. And we started on a brave but possibly misguided attempt to have a recreation center in every single neighborhood. With 52 neighborhoods, that's a bit much. Right now, we have recreation centers either being built or built in 32 neighborhoods, as well as 16 senior centers that are separate from those, 105 tennis courts, 42 pools that are open right now. Some of them are so old they kind of died. And we have Fountain Square and boat ramps, and we have the showboat Majestic and Sawyer Point, and it goes on and on and on. Anybody who plays adult athletics in Cincinnati who's amateur probably plays with us too.
Are there requirements that would limit participation of citizens or residents of the city of Cincinnati in terms of utilizing the Recreation Commission? And I suppose what I'm really asking you, are there age requirements? Are there neighborhood requirements? Who can make use of these facilities?
Well, probably the only place where you're going to see age requirements where you're specifically banned from a building would be in a senior center or in an all-adult center. For example, Butterfield Center, which is downtown, you have to be 18 and above. And that is because at the moment the majority of the members are frail elderly members, even though there are a lot of younger members too. There are also some limits on what time of day different ages may use a center. For example, we limit the centers for the 6 to 12-year-olds to a time when adults are not there, only adult workers. And in the evenings, then we have teenagers and adults. So that makes a lot of difference. Seniors have it all day long, right up until the children arrive. And sometimes we have intergenerational programs, too.
The news in the early fall reported that there was the possibility of closing some centers. Has that, and I imagine that it must have been a budgetary matter, has that been cleared up?
For this year, and only for this part of the year. As you probably realize, it costs millions and millions of dollars to keep up such a complex of public recreational facilities. And to staff them, and we staff at not very high salaries. It costs so much that with the 20% cut we already received, and then the additional cut we received for this year, and an additional 3% cut, we are in danger of closing 6 pools and 6 centers simply because we're running out of money. And we are rather desperate to keep up the centers that we have now, which are, for the most part, very, very old, and it would take us another $20 to $60 million to bring them all up to standard. We are praying, if one may pray in government, for more money for capital improvements.
Another statistical question for you. How many employees and how many people in a year's time are serviced by the Recreation Commission?
Well, the number of people employed are 263 full-time people, and this is for 650 locations, by the way, and up to 1,200 part-time employees over the course of the year. We're open year-round, and the time where we get our biggest influx, of course, is summer. Everyone knows about our lifeguard situation, and we've done a wonderful job of training lifeguards. We have 300 or more new lifeguards join us every year, and we train them all ourselves. Now, the numbers that we serve, if you count things like Riverfest, et cetera, are probably 3 to 4 million. But in general, it runs about 1 million people a year. Seems an awful lot for a city the size of Cincinnati. But the truth is that it's not just Cincinnatians who use Cincinnati Recreation Commission's ball fields, tennis courts, et cetera. There are people from northern Kentucky, people from eastern Indiana, people from Claremont County, people who are coming to take part in various Cincinnati recreation affairs. So it could be for a conference, it could be for a special presentation like a opening of a skate park. It could be, as I said, for Riverfest or our parties. We have parties in the park every Wednesday night. So huge numbers of things are happening to bring in millions of people.
I understand that the Recreation Commission is looking for seasonal and part-time employees. Tell me about the work opportunities with the Recreation Commission.
Well, earlier in our last interview, you talked about volunteerism. We have paid volunteers as well as regular volunteers. We don't pay very well, but what we do offer are incredible opportunities to do things that make a difference to others. We have summer day camps that are for thousands and thousands of children. We have about 50 camps, and 7 of those are specifically for children with disabilities. That is a wonderful summer opportunity to work during the day. I mentioned lifeguard. Many, many opportunities because our pools are open all over the city, and then we have huge pool parties for families on weekends. Down at Sawyer Point, do you think about all the events at Sawyer Point? We need so many people. Out at Lunkin Playfield, there are people working. And I mentioned our tennis courts. We have 105 tennis courts. We need about that many tennis instructors. There are so many opportunities, including working on our playgrounds with special programs, working at our ball fields as coaches and referees. So many opportunities that we have up to 1,200 people working at our highest season. And I forgot to mention, all of those people who are cutting grass, marking the ball fields, taking out the trash. They're enormous numbers of people. And they're not just 15 to 18-year-olds, as most people think it is. We do start at 15, but our oldest workers are as old as 90 years old. In fact, someone just recently retired at 90, and the only reason why she retired at 90 was because she was having a little trouble getting back and forth to work because her eyes were failing. But she loved working, and she loved working full-time.
Are there special requirements to work for the Recreation Commission?
Well, the most special requirement, and as we continue to bring people in, is to be a Hamilton County resident and to pass a criminal record check. If you can do those two, and of course you have to be able to work inside the United States to do that, you can apply for a job with the Cincinnati Recreation Commission, and my number, by the way, is area code 513-352-4009. I'm always taking applications, and I'm always interested. And I know we have so little time to talk about such an exciting place. So, Jerome, you have any other questions before we leave?
Pay, that's always a question that people will ultimately ask. What kind of pay can they expect?
$6 an hour for most of us, $7.50 for lifeguards. So you're not in there for the pay, you're in for the love of it.
And in our final moments, would you give us a telephone number where you can be reached, and are you posted on the Cincinnati Job Hotline?
We're posted on the Cincinnati Job Hotline, which is 352-CITY, and I also have my own job hotline, 352-4001, and we're posted on a website, www.cincyrec.rcc.org.
Sheila, thank you so very much for being my guest today. You've been very informative, and we appreciate the information.
All the education in the world won't help you get ahead in life if you can't express your ideas effectively. Every day, competition for advancement gets tougher and tougher. You need an edge. A Toastmasters club can give you that edge. A low-cost learning experience for men and women. Toastmasters gives you the confidence to express your ideas to anyone. Get the Toastmasters edge.
Thank you again, Jerome and Sheila. As was indicated during their interviews, they're both very active in separate local clubs. Jerome with the Cincinnati Toastmasters that meets at the Lutheran Church in Kenwood, and Sheila with the Northern Hills Club that meets at the fire station in Kenwood, in Fairfield. And they're both past area governors. At this point, we will commence the evaluation portion of the meeting. And for that, I would like to introduce Ray Boston, who will be our general evaluator today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be a guest evaluator today. I think the meeting lots of good information. And I'd like to introduce Carol Kormelink, who is going to evaluate Sheila.
Thank you, Ray. One thing I did want to mention, which is not part of my evaluation, but Joe Schwerling loves orange, and I noticed that he even painted his badge orange. I just had to mention that since that's something different. Fellow Toastmasters, and especially our talk show host, Sheila. I am evaluating her first performance as a talk show host. How well prepared? You were very well prepared and knowledgeable about what Jerome is doing, and I thought the way you asked questions was conducive to having him talk and give a good explanation. You had open-ended questions, and you were very knowledgeable about him. And I thought you had a very good introduction of your guest. I liked the way you looked at the camera. You made it very clear the field of expertise of volunteerism. I would have liked for Jerome to bring out that volunteering, you can add 5 years to your life by volunteering. So that's a benefit of volunteering. But I know that he's with the radio reading services and the contemporary arts, so you made that very clear the way you asked the questions. And I like your smile. You have a nice smile, and I like the way that you were in agreement with Jerome as he was talking. You had very good eye contact with the viewing audience as you were explaining what was about to happen next. I really like that. The one thing that would have changed my opinion of a host, I would have liked to have seen a business suit, although I thought, well, maybe because this is about volunteerism and a little more casual, that would have been fine. But I noticed that people with business suits I tend to listen to a little more intense. I thought it was a very successful interview. The only thing was when you called Jerome Art a few times after discussing the contemporary arts, but you did a really good comeback and when you realized that you had called him Art, and that brought a good response from Jerome. So all in all, I thought it was a great interview. I look forward to your next speeches.
Thank you. Very good. Do we need to take a minute now to evaluate or to write any response, or do we just continue? Okay, well then we'll have our next evaluator to evaluate Jerome, Steve. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, our honored guests, and Jerome. I wanted to read the objectives for this portion. You were to understand the dynamics of the television interview or talk show and prepare for questions that would be asked of you during the television interview, present a positive image on to the television camera, and you were the guest for our simulated television talk show. Overall, I thought you presented a very comfortable presence on camera. Your discussion was fluid. You gave two very good examples, I thought, as far as your extensive volunteer activities with the radio reading service and also the Contemporary Arts Center of Cincinnati. I liked the insight that you gave us on being interested in things that were a bit different. A couple of things that I'd like to comment on as far as growth areas. I noticed, and I don't know how this will show up on film, but when you were responding to a question from Sheila, you'd be looking up at the ceiling or off to the right somewhere rather than actually engaging the person who was interviewing you. And I thought that was a little bit distracting for me because I didn't know whether you were kind of searching around up here for how you were going to put things together or what was going on. So that was a little distracting. I also thought in the beginning some of your hand gestures were appropriate, but throughout the interview you tended to use your hand and you kind of made a little patting gesture or something, and I felt that as the interview progressed it got to be a little bit annoying, almost like maybe some nervousness showing. Let me see. I really liked your comment on the fact that volunteerism allows people the opportunity to become people that they wouldn't otherwise be. I would have liked a little more enthusiasm and intensity from you as far as how you embrace volunteerism, because this is one of the other things I wanted to comment on. You tended to lean back as far as sitting in the chair, and if you would have leaned forward a little bit more, I think that would have given us a little more intensity as to how you feel about volunteerism. I thought your closing was extremely gracious and a very good pulling together of your responses that were given in response to Sheila's questions. And I look forward to seeing your next presentation.
Thank you very much.
Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you. Great job, Steve. The second part of Jerome's evaluation.
Now, Carol was not interviewing me. Are you doing me now?
Yes. Well, let me see whose book this is.
You were doing Sheila, weren't you?
Well, I did Sheila. Now I'm doing you.
Oh, okay. All right.
This was a complicated setup today. So we have 2 speakers, but 4 speeches actually. And so we had 4 evaluators. And we did double duty. So I am now evaluating Jerome for his hosting Sheila. And I thought at first that you had misstated the TV Toastmasters, but one of the things in Toastmasters we learned listening skills, and I realized I was not listening because you did say TV Toastmasters, and I thought that was very clever that the name of your show was Talkmasters. So if I had listened closer, I wouldn't have thought that you made a mistake. So that was very good. I don't know what part is going to be shown on television, but I would have preferred it that instead of reading the bio, Sheila's biography, that you had stated it, that you'd known well enough without having to read it. I thought you were very clear and specific in the questions that you asked the guest, and you helped to shine the spotlight on the guest, which is what the talk show host is, not to try to stump them, if you want to be a good talk show host, in my opinion, but is to make it conducive to the guests. And I know that Sheila's with the Cincinnati Recreation Commission. You made that very clear. And I was interested in the unusual fact that you pulled out of her about the swimming pools. I wasn't aware of how many swimming pools we had in Cincinnati. And I liked the way you did appear confident and relaxed, and I liked the way that you nodded your head in agreement with what she was saying. Now, I was from a side view, and I wasn't aware of any eye contact that you made with the camera other than in the introduction. So I may have missed that. You may have made it and I didn't see it. But I thought I liked the way you were dressed. I think it's very professional looking, and when I see someone that's dressed professionally, I tend to listen more and think their words carry more weight. So I like the way that you were dressed. You have a fantastic voice. I've admired your voice since I first met you. I even call your answering machine just to hear your voice. And I thought you were a natural host. It's obvious that you have done this before. And the only thing was with your back to the time to be aware of the time restriction, which I must be aware of now. Thank you, Jerome, for your speech. Looking for more.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Joe Schwerling to evaluate the second part of the speaker's host job.
Thank you, Ray. And again, the Sheila's presentation was being the guest in a talk show situation, and I think you did very well. You had a very positive, I think the exact terms, the positive image on the television camera. Your poise, your presentation style, your sentence structure, everything demonstrated excellent knowledge about your topic, the Cincinnati Recreation Commission, your presentation, your your enthusiasm for the organization and its benefits and its needs, and throughout the talk situation, as the interviewee, you gave a lot of information. The stories that you added to it about existing situations and future needs all added to the information for the audience and demonstrated your enthusiasm at the same time. I particularly like your jacket there. It's kind of tending toward the orange spectrum, and that embroidery is very elegant. And so you presented yourself as a very prosperous, and I know with your writings for the Downtowner newspaper that you're very involved and acknowledged by many as for your literary and in this case vocal presentation styles. So I think you did an excellent job as an experienced presenter in an interview situation where you're passing on your experience and your enthusiasm to your audience. And maybe we'll see you on local TV as a permanent personality on some future talk shows. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And thanks to everyone for their participation today, and both from the content of our interview situations about volunteerism and the Cincinnati Recreation Commission, and thinking in terms of the Toastmasters being an organization to improve our communication and leadership skills where we can better serve those organizations and activities. So I encourage everyone to make a New Year's resolution to maximize their Toastmastering, volunteerism, and in particular the Cincinnati Recreation Commission. I'll return control to Cheryl Kormelink,
Acting President, in the absence of Rick Davis, and again, get well soon, Rick. I would like to thank everyone for being here today and our guests. I especially thank Ray for taking part, jumping right in. He's been with Toastmasters in the past, and he's just came back to town. He had moved out of town, and so he's getting right in there. Thank you very much, Ray. I'd like to thank Nikki, and I'd like to thank Kim Fetzer for being here. And they preferred not to come up to the camera. So we have our guests be very comfortable. And if you would like to come visit as a guest and you don't want to be on camera, that's fine. We don't make you do anything that you don't want to do. This is a volunteer organization, and we help you become a better person than what you thought you could. So one of the things that I would like to do is invite you to one of our next meetings, and our next meeting that will be televised will be Saturday, February the 15th, right here at the studio. Thank you all for coming. Let's give a hand for everyone's participation.